EnWave is the global leader in the application of vacuum microwave dehydration for agri-food, cannabis, and other industries with a unique royalty-based business model. We've got CEO Brent Charleton joining us to give a review of the company, highlight some recent company milestones, along with an outlook for 2025 and beyond. It's Wednesday, May the 7th. I'm Martin Gaga with Market Radius Research. Please remember this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Brent, good to have you back. How's it going?
Thanks, Martin. Going very well. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update today.
All right. Your news flow seems to have been really accelerating over the past couple of quarters with a lot of announcements, which tends to be a good sign of things. Why don't you give us an overview and a review of the company, and then we can get into all the things that have been going on.
Sounds good, Martin. Yeah, I'll touch upon the foundation pieces of the business first, and then we'll get into the more recent wins that we've had and ultimately how much excitement there is within the business about the future within this fiscal and beyond. So I'll start by reiterating what Martin stated in the introductory comments. EnWave Corporation is the global leader in vacuum microwave dehydration. We've had the most commercial success thus far in the food industry in a variety of different verticals, but we still have active projects ongoing in the cannabis space and legal jurisdictions, as well as in the biopharmaceutical area, which I'll touch upon in a few slides here. So mandatory disclaimer, we'll be providing some forward-looking statements, so please take into account this particular disclaimer. Our corporate profile, for those who don't know, EnWave Corporation, we are commercializing a proprietary vacuum microwave dehydration technology through a licensing royalty business model. And so we sell the hardware, the large-scale vacuum microwave machines, to a variety of different end users attached to a license. That is 100% the case in every instance. And each of those licenses has a royalty component, either a percentage of gross revenue created through the products being sold that are dried using this technology, or can be a fee per pound or kilogram of product being produced and then sold by the user. Thus far, we've commercialized this technology with north of 50 companies, and more recent years has yielded blue chip partners. So multi-billion dollar revenue food companies who have evaluated different ways to process certain snacks and ingredients, and ultimately chosen to partner with EnWave through our licensing model to exploit the merits of vacuum microwave and produce some very high quality, reasonably priced products in the market, both in North America, Europe, South America, Australasia, and Asia. In terms of our capital structure, we have just over 114 million common shares fully diluted. Our market cap is just under 37 million as of yesterday, and we're trading close to a 52-week high. But as you'll see, the range of the trading of this stock has been relatively tight over the past year or so. Our cash on the balance sheet as of last financials was about $4 million. The small amount of debt you see was a term loan that was accompanied by a credit facility provided by Desjardins at very favorable terms of up to $5 million of capital to be made available. We entered into that agreement for the purposes of growth capital and the ability to hopefully accelerate the commercialization of our technology. So I mentioned 50 plus partners using this technology. This slide provides those logos of many of the companies you might know in the food space, others you might not know, given that within the ecosystem of food manufacturing, they're not all branded companies. So a lot of folks who are producing the snacks and ingredients that you're buying from your local grocery store on any given day are actually being produced by co-manufacturers who then sell them to the branded companies who then bring them to market. So a really good example of that within our partner list would be MicroDried, which is one of our longest standing partners and just a recent purchaser of their fourth large-scale vacuum microwave unit, who has been producing a variety of powders and fragments and whole pieces of fruit and vegetable since back in 2012, and have a very robust list of some of the brands you would know. Again, they're doing everything from craft beer ingredients to granolas to cereals to ice creams and yogurts, what have you. The list goes on and on. So when you think about dried end product, there really is a significant list of potential applications that can help drive royalty growth for our business. Others of note on this slide, Dole, Calbee, Branch Out Foods, which is an emerging snack brand that's traded on the NASDAQ, and they've done some fantastic work in terms of broadening their distribution recently, and they now have 3 of our large-scale machines in operation. We also are continuing to work with the U.S. Armed Forces for military rations. Primary focus right now is being on bringing into their ecosystem a dried cheesecake bar, which is set to be purchased by the military ration assemblers starting in the latter half of this calendar year. So, I mean, I could probably spend 2 or 3 hours going through each of these accounts, but that highlights some of the recent and more impactful partnerships that we have. In regards to the investment highlights of EnWave Corporation, talked about the technology itself. When you combine vacuum and microwave, you create a very, very fast, efficient way to take water out of organic materials at controllable low temperatures. And that's quite important given that the lower temperature you can remove moisture from a food product, the higher level of nutrients that you can retain in each of those applications. Also, the technology itself is what I refer to as volumetric or homogeneous. And that is vastly different from other incumbent drying platforms in that the user can create different products at unique final moisture content, stopping at 5%, 10%, 12%, whatever they wish to have at the end of the day, they can achieve using this particular technology. And of course, the importance is that we protected this technology. We have 18 patent families. So that's a combination of apparatus design patents and process patents that we filed for in pretty much every market that we're commercializing this technology into currently. It's a massive addressable market. The existing value of freeze-dried machinery that's sold on an annual basis is about or going to be $9 billion as of 2033 with a pretty aggressive CAGR. And in terms of the value of freeze-dried food products in market as of 2030 is about 200 billion. So this is a big market that we're trying to carve out market share from and aggressively going after. The business model itself is quite attractive because the more machines that we sell and deploy, the bigger those diversified royalty streams will grow and ultimately cover all the expenses of our business and fall to the bottom line, which we can then either use to buy back shares depending on the valuation of the business and or establish a dividend paying program. We're well funded. As I mentioned, our cash resources are more than adequate for our growth prospects. And with the security of that credit facility more recently, we really have a backstop in the business. And lastly, I'll just draw upon the robust sales pipeline that we built and the investment in the expansion of our sales team over the past year or so, bringing in top tier caliber folks who already have existing networks in the food industry. And that should yield better results starting next year, given our sales process typically takes between 6 to 12 months to get projects to the point of decision on CapEx deployment, signing licenses, and the adoption of the technology. So all the wins, the more recent wins you've seen here has been basically relationships that we've been working on last year that are now coming to fruition, whereas all the work that we're doing now and the trade show attendance and building that pipeline should come to fruition next fiscal year. And next fiscal year is September 30th year end. So just briefly, problem with the other incumbent drying technologies available in the food industry is that they often don't offer ability to innovate, offer distinct new products to market that hit upon consumer trends. Right now, there's massive continuing consumer trend towards healthier options, portability, the ability to retain as much of the natural color and flavor of the food product that's being turned into a shelf-stable iteration. That is still very much the case. And also the technologies that are available take way too long to process product. Like we're talking 8 to 9 hours if you were to use air drying and 15 plus hours if you use freeze drying, whereas Rev or vacuum microwave drying, our version of vacuum microwave is termed Rev, is about 2 hours maximum. So massively different. This slide just quickly illustrates our RevWorks toll manufacturing facility in the bottom right. So that's a larger scale tray-based system that we have within our headquarters in Delta, British Columbia, that's made available to companies that are evaluating the adoption of our technology and can be using this facility to produce products, take them to market, and hopefully de-risk the CapEx investment and sign up licenses more long-term when they take that manufacture in-house. This has been an incredibly useful sales tool for us, a showroom per se. And anyone who wishes to come and evaluate this firsthand, it's located in the Lower Mainland, or wishes to visit us, happy to provide tours to investors or prospective investors. Talked about some of the ways that our Rev technology wins versus the incumbent drying technologies. So I'll just add a couple more that I didn't speak to yet, which is the reduced footprint in plant space. So it's more efficient and therefore a lower overall cost associated to use this technology versus, say, freeze drying, which we consider to be our primary competitor in the space still. And also the use of this technology can help in turning trash to treasure. So taking B and C grade produce or food materials that could not be sold in fresh form and turning them into high value, again, powders, fragments that can be used as ingredients with the nutritive value inherent to the initial raw material. Also, the technology conserves water and has minimal CO2 emissions and incredibly energy efficient when considering the end outputs that we provide. It's about 70% of the electricity that would be required for equivalent production of a freeze-dried plant. So we've had good success in multiple food verticals. In the blue circles on the left of the screen, that indicates how many licenses we've signed in each of those verticals. So fruit and veg is still dominant at 18, dairy in second, 15, and so on in these different areas. We see tremendous near-term growth prospects in the pet food area. We've also got some very interesting projects in human consumption meat snack area, and then still have many projects on the go in different regions of the world in those two primary verticals, fruit and veg and dairy. In terms of new applications that are under development, I'd say confectionery is one where we're starting to see new interest. And I mean, we really never know. Every couple of months, we get a new inquiry on an application we've never even thought about, and then we'll try it and test it, and then push these projects forward. Talked about the TAM. This slide illustrates specifically what the numbers are in terms of freeze-dried equipment sold on an annual basis, and again, the value of freeze-dried products in market on an annual basis. As we can see, it's growing significantly, and it's not even including the air-dried product. That's incredibly hard data to procure to add into this TAM calculation. But needless to say, we're only a very small component right now and have huge opportunity for growth in the future. So in regards to how we make money, so first and foremost, the majority of our revenue over the past, call it 4 to 5 years, has been generated through the sales of these machines. Our smallest scale units sell for approximately, I'll talk in Canadian dollars, 300 grand. It's a batch unit, and then it scales up to continuous nature machinery for between 1.75 and 2.5 million Canadian. Last year, fiscal 24, that made up 76% of our revenue generated, with the majority of the remaining revenue being generated through royalty collection. So companies that had purchased their machines respectively, commercialize different products, either direct to consumer or on a co-manufacturing basis, and submitting quarterly royalty reports back to our company. As you can see, we've saw good growth in royalties year over year in fiscal 24, and we're expecting the same in fiscal 25 and into fiscal 26, which I'll talk to in a few slides here. And then third, a smaller component of revenue generation ties back to RevWorks, which I spoke to a few slides back, that is co-manufacturing or toll drying for potential longer-term royalty partners of EnWave. The idea there is that we charge a fee that is fair, but clearly more expensive than if they were to do internal manufacture for their respective products, because that's where we would like to see all of the folks that use RevWorks is transition into full-fledged long-term royalty partners with their own machines being purchased from our business. So why do companies consider EnWave and partner with EnWave, even though we're commercializing this technology through a royalty licensing business? And to be frank, this is not a consistent common practice. Selling processing equipment in the food space, it needs to have a very compelling value proposition to justify. And so a few reasons for how we've been able to justify that is, first and foremost, the technology's inherent properties. Second is our knowledge of the application of this technology for specific products. So we don't go into conversations not having tested probably all of the different products of interest of the prospect. So we can quickly get them to an end result in terms of the product attributes that they're looking for. And then third is the follow-up and the consistent support, both troubleshooting machinery, making sure they have the optimization in their processing protocols and the best products possible to ensure that they have tremendous business success, because the more success that they enjoy, the more success EnWave enjoys, and the more success our shareholders enjoy. And so we have 24/7 remote monitoring of all of our machines, and are quick to ensure that we maximize the utilization of the fleet of Rev equipment that is currently out there. The sales process, as I mentioned, it can be tedious at times. We're starting to see that shorten given the number of new products in market that are having commercial success. There's less evaluation that needs to take place to validate commercial prospect of certain types of snacks and ingredients. But I would say between 12 and 18 months is a typical time frame for a larger business to evaluate the technology, go through their shelf life studies, focus groups, marketing preparation, distribution planning, buying the machinery. Takes 6 months to build a large scale machinery. We always have our smaller units in stock ready for deployment. And then finally, commercialization and rollout of the product. And then following that, of course, we have the long-term relationship and a shared interest to drive their revenue and to drive our royalties on a go-forward basis. This is what our machines look like. Our tray-based systems, anyways, for the 60 kilowatt and 120 kilowatt lines. We also have a drum-based system to handle product, which tumbles the product through, and I won't get into the nuances of which one's better for each application, but they both produce high quality end products in an economical, homogeneous dried fashion. You'll see that the size of these large scale machines is quite big, you know, the size like a milk truck driving down the highway is how I would compare it to. So not incredibly massive, but not by any means a household microwave being used. So to our business model, this is where we've attracted new interest and new shareholders into the business, is the fact that it has natural scalability. Every new machine that we deploy, the buyer of that is intending to maximize the capacity utilization, which is going to evolve into generating significant new royalty streams, adding into that diversified royalty portfolio. And the more royalties that we generate and the higher percentage of our revenue in the future years that we collect being royalties will create robust EBITDA potential for the business. And that, I believe, is what's going to drive the valuation of our company is quickly and materially growing these royalty streams. And what we're starting to see now this year and hopefully next year as well, more of the sales of our machines are coming from repeat purchase orders. So existing royalty partners who have exhausted their manufacturing capacities based on market demand of their respective products and now need more. And so once they turn on the next machines that they purchased, it's instantaneous royalty growth because they already have demand. And that's vastly different from a company who is slowly starting to gain distribution and trying to prove out a product and market. Of course, we have those projects on the go as well, but the mix of that is about 50-50 for this year. So mentioned our funding and obviously our sales expansion. And most recently, we hired a new business development manager, domiciled out of the Netherlands, who's joined our greater team, been fully onboarded and now working hard to drive our pipeline. We're also attending more trade shows than we have in history. So pretty much every food technology trade show that's going on around the world, we attended this year, and our intent is to continue that, to continue to fill the pipeline in collaboration in certain geographies with third-party machine resellers. So we do have other folks that are either in Japan or South Korea, in Europe, Australia, that are also looking to bring leads to us. And in exchange for the good work that they do, if it evolves into a commercial transaction, they'll get a commission on that, which is a standard fare in the business. Quickly on this slide, show you the dispersion of the deals that we've signed. So representing food partners, cannabis partners, and our service partners, those third-party manufacturers, or sorry, third-party machine resellers that we've engaged with. And also in purple, innovation centers. So we're talking about research and development organizations that have purchased, we haven't given it to them, they purchased our 10 kilowatt units to be placed and to showcase to their domestic food industry. So we have that in Denmark, in Ireland, in Spain, in Australia now, and a few in North America. So these are really good choke points to help drive new business. So recent wins since the new year, this calendar year. To begin, we signed our first deal in Brazil, and this is a technology evaluation and license option agreement with a new startup, which is being funded by a very successful family with deep pockets. So well capitalized, they have a clear vision. They're starting out with initial market trials now, and the expectation is that they will decide to either enter into or not enter into a full-fledged commercial license agreement and purchase order on machinery before the end of this calendar year. The second announcement we had in February was to sell a 10 kilowatt unit to a company called Sprouted Proteins in Peru. And they're currently commercializing a French fry snack domestically, which we're really excited about, because if that has legs, then there's many different markets that we can take that and plug it into with different snacking companies. The first announcement in March was a 10 kilowatts sold to a Japanese firm called Hokai Yamamoto. This it was a sales process that took about 12 months. A visit to Japan to go and see their facilities, meet them face to face. They came to Vancouver. We did the trials. They were convinced that this was the technology for their business, and then scale up from a 10 kilowatt to a large scale machine could happen sometime in fiscal 2026. We also signed, and I know you want to talk a bit about this, Martin, was a master service agreement with a pharmaceutical co-manufacturer called Biotechnique, based in Eastern United States. This is a company we've had ongoing discussions with for several years. They have clientele, so big pharma, that want to trial our technology. So through our collaboration, that's what's going to take place now in Vancouver, actually within the next month here. Pending results, if they're positive, that would lead to potentially selling equipment to Biotechnique directly to have on site at their facility in Pennsylvania, and then they can continue to conduct trials and work with other clients that they have. This would be, I believe, complementary to the existing relationship we have with GEA Lyophil, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical lyophilizer machine sellers globally. They have one of our machines currently in Germany doing the same thing, with many big pharma coming to them with different products they'd like to test. The next steps in the pharmaceutical industry for us would be a commitment from one or a consortium of pharmaceutical companies to work directly with GEA Lyophil to fund the building of a larger scale GMP certified continuous pharmaceutical grade vacuum microwave machine. And frankly, they have the expertise to do that. EnWave does not internally. We would benefit and have commercial terms set on how that would work going forward. And then the last two announcements here worthwhile mentioning, because they're very impactful financially for us, would be two large-scale machines being sold. One being the fourth large-scale machine sold to MicroDried, one of our longest-standing partners, given they need more capacity. And that's on the heels of actually the tariffs are bad for a lot of businesses, but seemingly they're pretty good for EnWave. And being that MicroDried has had lots of business come to them for their powders and ingredients, given that the importation of freeze-dried product that certain food companies were getting from certain Asian countries are being tariffed very strongly. And so those are no longer economically viable, and a lot of the business is moving over to MicroDried. And then lastly would be Processier. It's a Mexican partner who's scaling up from a 10 kilowatt to a large scale unit, and have secured a 2-year supply agreement with a very well-known snack brand in the US. So as soon as that machine starts up in July, instantaneously we'll start generating new royalties for EnWave. And here's a picture of some of the powders that Milne MicroDried is now selling into the food space as a colorant and as a nutritive, nutrition contributor. Another point I'll say is folks that follow HHS in the United States, they've obviously banned many of the artificial food colorings in the industry now. And so that's another growth opportunity for Milne. Is okay, well, you can't use that red dye anymore. Well, how about using some powdered cranberry or raspberry or strawberry to replace?
So just quickly on that, since you had the slide up, they dry the cranberries or whatever, grind it up, and then you've got the colorant for the food ingredient.
That's correct. Yeah, and so
Okay.
at their operations, they have a special powdering room. So after the material is dried down to 2-3%, it's then taken in bulk to the powdering room, turned into powder, and then sold. So talked about royalty growth. As you can see, we had a almost 24% CAGR over the past 5 years in royalty growth up till fiscal 24, just under $2 million in third-party royalties collected last year. This year, we're hoping to come in a range of 2.5 to 3 million. I think 2.5 is a good realistic number based on a number of new large-scale machines that have come online recently, and also just increased overall capacity utilization with the machines that have been deployed to companies, again, that not necessarily having repeat orders, but are still working to build their own respective businesses. So we have good opportunity to grow that portfolio this 12 months and beyond. And beyond fiscal 25, we want to get to 5 million in royalty revenue as fast as we possibly can. We think we can get there in the next 2 to 3 years, potentially. And of course, that would cover all of the expenses in our business. That would be a major milestone for us. And a leading indicator for royalty generation is how much kilowatt capacity of machines have actually been installed. And this graph illustrates that growth we've seen, again, the past 5 years. And we'll see another big bump in fiscal 25 as we've recently installed a number of large scale lines for new and current royalty partners. So lastly, I'll just quickly summarize the board of directors, not talk about myself, but the other four. John Bedreski has been our chairman for quite some time, leads the capital markets expertise in the business, and one of our larger internal shareholders. Louise Lalonde is a new audit chair for us. It came from, she retired from PwC, but came with tremendous experience and has done a really good job thus far. We're happy to have her on board. She replaced Mary Ritchie, who retired. She just retired. That's pretty much it. She's basically cut off all of her board roles primarily and spending more time in Mexico with her family. Good for her. Patrick Turpin is an expert in CPG. So he created, built, and exited Pop Chips, if those were familiar with that brand. He's also was a seasoned executive at Costco for many years, an investment banker by trade for a part of his career, and has tremendous connections that he's introduced so many leads to myself, and he's a very high value, high character guy. And then Pablo Cusati brings the operational expertise. He's worked as COO for many well-known consumer brands globally, and he brings the perspective of the plant manager when they're considering the adoption of our technology. What would they think of, or what would they need? And so our sales folks learn a lot from him and implement that information into our sales pitches and business development efforts. And then just two folks that I'll highlight, or three, I should say. Dana, our new VP of Global Sales, came from Gordon Food Service, where she was responsible for $1 billion plus annual revenue. So big responsibility, good network, and very capable. And then Mehmet leads our engineering group and has done for many, many years. He is the brainchild behind the PLC code in our technology. And Dr. John Zhang is the application of this technology to a variety of different food items and applications. So I'll stop there and answer any questions that come in from the group that have joined us today.
All right. I noticed here on your royalty growth over the last 5 years, your royalties are growing at 23.8%. But if you go to the next slide, your kilowatts installed, I think, are at 13.7 or something like that. So you're getting greater royalty per kilowatt installed. And I'm curious what's driving that. Are you able to now, as you're more mature and proven, sort of charge a higher royalty, or are there bigger machines where they have throughput, or that seems like an optimistic or a very positive metric, the relative growth rates of those two?
Yeah, good point, Martin. So it's a rising of tides across the board. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the companies that graduated from a small scale unit and bought a large scale machine had great capacity, manufacturing capacity, but didn't have customers to allocate 100% of that manufacturing capacity. So now what we're seeing is more success with those companies using the machines more consistently, producing more products, and generating more royalties from the same installed base. So when I talk about royalty growth for fiscal 25 here, it's a combination of those repeat purchase orders on machinery being installed and immediately starting up, creating more royalties, but also just an overall increase in utilization from the existing machines that are being installed and deployed.
Okay, so you're getting more out of each machine that's out there. All right. You have, and just to clarify something, you talked about 50 royalties out there. Is that 50, but you have some of your clients have multiple machines. Is that you have 50 clients out there, some of them with multiple machines, or is it 50? And I'm just being a little nitpicky, but I'm just kind of curious. Do you have 50 machines out there, or do you have like 55 or 60? Because some clients,
a spreadsheet, a breakdown in the scale of machines and who's got what and which. But overall, so we have 50 plus companies, both like 42 in the food industry and 9 or so in cannabis, that have committed to paying royalties to use and access our technology. Okay, so that being said, in terms of machines deployed, we have, I believe, 20 large scale machines that have been commissioned and are being used commercially to date, and like 40 something small 10 kilowatt units. A variety of them are being used for commercial production, but some are only being used for process improvements and product development. If a company bought large scale machines, they're using that small machine for that versus commercial production. So it's you know, if we're talking about, like, you call it 2 million in royalties right now with 20 machines deployed, give or take. To get to where we want to be is about between, call it 35 and 40 large scale machines should get us to that sort of $5 million royalty mark. So almost a doubling of where we're at today, but we've had some more recent announcements, which will add on to that. So call it like another 15 to 18 machines over the coming years here can get us to that point.
All right. On your margins, you have three lines of business: the machine sales, the tolling, and then the royalty side of it. Is the royalty business essentially 100% margin or close there too, or just
Close there too. I mean, not 100%, but very, very close to full margin. I mean, there's still like administrative expenses and whatnot, but
yeah,
that's basically full margin. And on the machine sales, we're give or take 30% gross margin on those sales. Obviously,
okay.
different negotiations yield lower margin and some yield higher margin. It really depends on the size of company and how compelled we are to do business with new entities.
And then I presume the tolling business is higher than sort of somewhere in between the royalty and the
Tolling business, you might be surprised by this, but your typical co-manufacturing tolling margin is typically like 10 to 15%.
Oh, really?
Not
Okay.
not that strong, but for us, based on the uniqueness of the technology, we're typically negotiating between 20 and 25%.
Gotcha. And that is a part of the business, but that is foundational to growing clients. They test it, they run products through there. The goal isn't to grow your tolling business per se. The goal is to run the tolling so that they'll buy big equipment and then pay royalties,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, and also it's acted as a backstop for companies like royalty partners of ours that are growing and have now need more capacity for machinery, but they can't snap their fingers and get another large line tomorrow. It takes time to build a machine. So we've done processing for Branch Out Foods and other companies to bridge them until they've gotten more of their machines up and running in their respective facilities.
Are customers now or leads, are they, I presume, whatever, when you first started this, when you first talked about the royalty model, their jaws probably dropped and said, what? We don't do the work, we buy equipment, we don't pay royalties. I don't know, is it more of a widespread practice now? And are people just more accepting of it where that's less of a hurdle to try to get them through?
Yeah, imagine that. Hey, like I've been with the company for 15 years and observed what was happening at that time and on the sales side. And we didn't have a large scale machine in existence. It was hypothetical and a value proposition that seemingly would justify a royalty, but who knew? So the most difficult sales obviously were those early days to get it going. And then more recently, why we found more acceleration in the number of deals getting signed is that our management team and our sales group, I've empowered them with flexibility to get deals done, right? And we're going into the weeds in terms of what each individual business case looks like and making sure that it's going to be win-win throughout. So we don't go in there with an arrogance or staunchness about the value of the technology. We're here to work with companies to try and surface value and that to be mutually exploited. So that's been a bit different. Plus the fact that we now have many more commercial products in market and successful co-manufacturing partners that are making good money. And so you point to those case studies, you can explain that and work with individuals' variable costs for their businesses and show them firsthand through our modeling that if they invest in EnWave and they execute on their business model, they're going to make money.
All right. Is it fair to say that the dried fruit and vegetables is sort of the biggest product produced out of your EnWave machines?
At this point, absolutely. Yeah. There's and just the breadth of applications, like we spoke to what Milne MicroDried participates in. You know, and it's not limited to just them, like globally, there's a huge opportunity to start to display some of the other ingredients that are being used for vacuum microwave dried ingredients.
Yeah, like I've tried your dried fruit and others, and yours, in my opinion, is just clearly far superior to it. Is the consumer have you made a big enough impression in the market where customers are now like disappointed if they get the traditional freeze dried and the sort of the level of expectation is higher and it's sort of nudging other companies to go a higher value added route?
I can't say definitively that consumers are looking for or not looking for, but what I can say is that the companies that are commercializing these new snack products and comparing them to freeze-dried focus groups before making a commitment to vacuum microwave technology have seen that there is a preference towards what we produce versus what other drying technologies produce. And hopefully that will continue and show itself in regards to improved sales for their own respective products and market. And obviously, again, a rising of tide in terms of royalty generation from all of our licensed partners.
Let's talk about the pharma industry. That you've got now two partners in that space. Pharma in any industry, in any aspect of it, is very long lead time just getting products through FDA, and it's so highly regulated. Could you just so I'm clear, these partners that you have in the US and then in Germany, they're doing the testing for the pharma companies who want to use your process to make a better, faster pharmaceutical or agent in their process, and they're just testing it out initially. How would that sales cycle work once it sort of passes the initial testing? What are the other steps that would have to go through before it gets launched and used with your technology?
I'll do my very best to answer this question, given that I'm a neophyte when it comes to pharmaceutical product development. But what I've gleaned from the conversations that I've had with our respective partners is that the sales process would look like many of these big pharma companies going to GEA to do trials for specific biopharmaceutical products, either vaccinations or other materials, test drying as a first batch run. And if it shows promise in terms of its viability, its shelf stability, and overall replication of what would be produced in a traditional freeze drying setting, then it's about the investment. So they need to understand what that investment would be in a larger scale commercial line before they would conduct any further trial work, going through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials to get a commercial product to market. And that is a huge undertaking, huge investment. That's where they're at right now, is that they've got all these companies doing those initial trials, but they need to compel one or more to commit the capital and human resources necessary to take a new drug through from start to finish using vacuum microwave technology. Because you can't just switch out freeze drying for vacuum microwave in terms of the production protocols for GMP certified pharmaceutical products.
And you've largely outsourced that product, that business development. So you're not actually writing, like, you don't have a big sales team that's pursuing the pharma industry. You're giving it to other guys so they can pursue it, and it's not hitting your financial statement on a monthly.
Exactly, and that was the whole point of it, was to have blue sky opportunity in that particular vertical with folks that know the business and can best try and commercialize it, versus us who would be limited in resource and expertise. And from my perspective, when we did have someone in the business, like, it was not a good use of resources. And so I think a better use of our resources is to invest in areas where we know there's a clear commercialization path, and now it's about growth and how fast we can achieve that growth.
Let's talk about the cannabis industry. Obviously, it's nowhere nearly as hot as it was a bunch of years ago, but you still got, what, 20% of your machines are in that sector, I think, and 9 out of the 50 or so. Anyways, it's a material part of your business. How is that? Are there still growth?
It's not a material part of our business right now, and never really was.
Just
like to spend a little time on this, but history, we sold a number of large machines during the heyday, 2018, 2019, sold a number of large scale units, many of which never were installed. So the companies that bought them didn't even finish the facilities to put the machines into. And when hard times fell upon those companies financially, we were able to negotiate buying those machines back for pennies on the dollar and redeploying to current food licensed partners. So to date, we've only got 2 large scale vacuum microwave units being used commercially, and a smattering of 10 kilowatt units throughout Europe and Australia that are being used. If we look at like royalty generation, it is a very, very small component to that pool. The number of licenses, there's still 9 licenses that are in good standing, but more impactful to revenue generation are the 41 or so food license partners.
Okay. All right. Well, that's so, and I guess that's sort of indicating there's not a whole lot of growth expectations coming out of the cannabis industry at this point.
We don't bank on any cannabis deals. If they come, we of course answer, and we have had knocks on the door from several of the bigger, more stable players in the business right now, and we'll continue to move forward with those projects. But if they come, I would treat them as surprises for our investors watching the story. Where you should focus is on our food partner repeat orders and new blue chip names adopting our technology and or buying the ingredients from one of our co-manufacturing partners, driving the need for more machines being deployed.
I'd like to get into the general on the food side, the business development, where you talked about what 12 to 18 months, I guess, to get the initial orders. To just reiterate how that is, because you start off, maybe you do some toll manufacturing, they take a 10 kilowatt machine, then hopefully they get that scaled up, and then they buy one of the bigger machines. Can you walk us through that process and how long it takes until they're really like a big royalty paying client?
Mm-hmm. For small to medium enterprises, it can take 3 to 6 months or even less. If it's a proven product in market and they just want to replicate what is already successful, then you negotiate commercial terms and license, you sign, and you sell the machinery. That's nice. Those situations are great. But with the larger companies, you've got multiple stage gates of evaluation, making sure that their business case is justified before they deploy the CapEx to get the machinery into their ecosystem and then go from there. The reason for that is kind of twofold, is that they're more diligent in terms of reducing the potential for failure. And second is you've got multiple layers of management that all have certain responsibilities, and they don't want, I've used this analogy before, they don't want this machine in the corner of a plant with their name sprayed on it like this is Bob's mistake or Jill's mistake, right? They want to be absolutely certain that the products they're going to be producing using this technology are going to sell and sell very well. One of the key differences in sort of that long drawn out process that we've experienced in times past with larger companies is the fact now that we have more co-manufacturing licensed partners, so folks that are focused on producing products for other companies that are capable and have manufacturing capacity to deliver volumes that would be required from these larger CPGs. So all of the household name brands that you think of, likely talking to them right now, and they are very pleased to hear that they don't have to deploy CapEx to get products that they might want to launch. So it's lower risk. They can get the products to market. If that gains traction, then what does that lead to? Material volume improvements and needs, and then bigger orders to our co-manufacturers, which is going to drive the royalties from those co-manufacturers back to EnWave, and then subsequently new purchase orders on large scale machinery, like we've seen with both Processier and Milled Microgrind more recently. Like both those companies are co-manufacturers for larger brands.
Okay, that's okay. So the more those co-manufacturers, those ingredient makers are really key, because if somebody, a big CPG wants to buy, they don't have to get the equipment. They can have a much shorter route to market going through your partners.
So we work with them directly on the product development to make sure they're getting exactly what they want. And then we collaborate with our co-manufacturing partners to get the pricing and to impart them with the optimization of the processes, and then matchmake. And by being a matchmaker, how do we win? Increase royalties.
Okay, and if they get enough more sort of CPG companies, more royalties, and eventually more machines and so on and so on, and then more adoption in the industry. Okay. You've announced some deals in the past where you've renegotiated licenses, because and I guess I want to talk a little bit about your licenses. They're pretty specific on what they can manufacture, where they can manufacture it, and so forth. And then if they want to spread into different product lines, they need to renegotiate that. So it's sort of an open-ended question, but just can you give us a little more insight into how that works and how that benefits EnWave and shareholders, those license renegotiations?
They're like license additions, really, because the renegotiation is expanding the types of products that a company can produce commercially and or geographic regions in which they can place machinery into. Some of those negotiations or expansions of license rights have exclusivity components tied to them. And if they want an exclusive protection, say in a Central American country for pineapple and banana, well, that has to come at a cost, because we're then now not going to be engaging with any other potential adoptees in that area to do products that we know are commercially viable. So there's a minimum royalty component tied to that expansion that's paid on an annual basis to justify us not selling additional machines on a non-exclusive basis to different companies. So that can be several $100,000 in terms of like one-off payments that can be negotiated in that sense. And in the case of, I'll use Branch Out Foods as an example, they recently requested exclusivity for blueberries in Peru. And we said, great, that's great, you want exclusivity, but you have to have a minimum performance requirement that's going to justify us providing you with that. So we came to a fair number, considering their machine manufacturing capacity, of a minimum of an incremental $50,000 in royalties to be paid per annum from them. And if they don't meet that from pure blueberry sales, then it will revert to non-exclusive. So it is bespoke in the sense that we have to analyze the opportunity that's being requested and then match that up against our business pipeline and determine, what value does that hold for us currently.
You mentioned the U.S. Army in your presentation and so forth. That seems like a huge potential opportunity in the cheesecake line and potentially other lines. Can you just dig a little bit more into the U.S. Army or military provisions opportunity, how that's progressing and the potential impact of that?
I'll first say it takes forever.
Okay.
But once you're in, and it's very sticky. And
Yeah.
we're past all the points of initial evaluation, obviously previously announced. Bridgeford Foods getting a large scale machine to do co-manufacturing for this particular project. Where we're at now is the latter half of this calendar year, we're expecting the first commercial sales into the military ration assemblers, which would then sell them to the U.S. Armed Forces. But beyond the cheesecake bar, there is another, call it dozen products that are currently under evaluation by the U.S. Armed Forces for incorporation into their ration packs. And that could either come from Bridgeford or other co-manufacturers that we already have driving their volumes again. So how we work with the U.S. Armed Forces is very closely with their food scientists on different applications and then help them procure what new items they may want to have. And so if any new items are incorporated, we're talking significant volumes. And again, back to what we talked about before, as a matchmaker, you bring them together, and then that's going to drive machine sales on a go-forward basis. The clarity on how big this U.S. Army relationship can get is still unknown based on timing. But from talking to different suppliers, it can go from 1 plant to 5 plants quite quickly if there is incorporation, like a demand, which we're again going to get a lot of half of this year for cheesecake.
You're pretty much all over the world, except I guess Africa, but you're a nice string of locations through Asia and South America. It's a big world, so you've got a bit of a footprint in most places. Where, geographically speaking, do you think the biggest growth opportunities are for you?
Think that there are growth opportunities in every major continent for us. There isn't a lack of opportunity, and that's the reason why we're expanding our sales team so we can handle more of that opportunity. I think in Europe there is a huge runway for adoption of this technology that's not yet been achieved. We were in the Gulf region, and there's a number of projects that are very interesting for us with internal farming, like within temperature controlled facilities in that particular region. In Asia as well, there really isn't a geographic region where we would not want to do business necessarily, so long as there is an infrastructure that respects intellectual property law, and that, of course, our technicians and people feel safe within the environment that the machines are being installed into.
Okay. I've got a follow-up question here from the audience, and I think it refers to the U.S. military cheesecake, and they're asking, is it the final product that's freeze-dried in the package, or is it just some of the ingredients that go into the cheesecake that get, not freeze-dried, excuse me, vacuum rev-dried? What is that?
It's a specific formulation of the cheesecake, so a recipe. Bridgeford makes that cheesecake, cuts it into the dimension that the U.S. Army wants. Those bars are put on a tray, put through the vacuum microwave system, and then dried down to shelf stability, packaged appropriately, and then those are sold to a military ration assembler company who will take that cheesecake and combine it with like several other components, and that ration pack is then sold to the U.S. Armed Forces. So we clip a royalty on the value of that cheesecake component being sold to the military ration assembler. That's how it works.
Okay, and it's the whole cheesecake that goes into the
yeah, it's a cheesecake bar in bar form. The entire cheesecake goes in to be dried.
You talked about you've got a very solid balance sheet. You've got largely, or you haven't tapped into your line of credit at all here, have you?
No, we have that small term loan, which I stated was there's a company the transaction. So
yeah,
the bank's got to make money some way. So yeah, that was an obligatory term loan.
Gotcha. And that is basically a bit of a safety net. You have an umbrella for a rainy day, that sort of a thing. And then you're trying to drive growth. So if you have the flexibility, if there's some growth opportunities to pursue, you have that financial flexibility.
Like interest rate on that is prime plus a point or a point and a quarter. And so like if we want to lease a machine or build large scale machine and finance it and charge obviously higher interest rate and and make the spread on that, we can. We have flexibility to do so. And then just ensure the receivables. There's various programs to do that through EDC. So now we have more flexibility in deal making, which is great without having to depreciate, or sorry, depreciate is the wrong word, deplete our cash resources.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because also, like, our balance sheet, like, you gotta think, when companies are going to get into a relationship with us commercially, if they're smart people, which most of them are, they're going to take a look at our financial statements and say, okay, we're investing in this technology. Are these folks going to be around for the long term to service that technology and to be a technology partner? And so it's important that we always have a certain level of cash on our balance sheet to represent that.
For the coming year, any sort of the milestones we should be looking for is just more announcements of sales, royalty agreements, that sort of a thing, and just at kind of a consistent pace going forward, or any other sort of potential big news that investors should keep their eyes open for?
Yeah, we're not a home run grand slam announcement type business. It's a lot of singles, doubles, and sometimes you get the odd home run with a well-known household family name adopting the technology. But really, that's what it is. It's the more large-scale machine purchase orders that we can secure dramatically will improve our financial performance. So for us to be a cash flow break-even, slightly cash positive business, based on our current royalty run rate, we need to sell 4 large-scale machines per year. We've got 2 confirmed thus far and a very strong pipeline to hopefully close several more before the end of September, September 30th. And then moving into fiscal 26, that pipeline looks even a bit more robust. So beyond 4 large-scale machines, once you get to like 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 machines, hopefully on an annual basis, that gets up to significant cash flow, and obviously expedites the timeline to get to close to 40 machines deployed, which should theoretically, based on current royalty generation, get us well beyond the 5 million royalty threshold, and really transform the business, and I suppose how it would be viewed in the capital markets.
All right. Well, that seems like a good place to end it, with a good vision there. Any final comments before we wrap it up here, Brent?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity again to refresh the story with folks and introduce it to others. And our next quarterly financials come out on May 21st. So we'll do our standard conference call thereafter. So look forward to discussing that with everybody then.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Brent. That was a great update. Good to chat with you again. All the best, and talk to you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Martin.